Well, hello everyone. As you can see, this is my husband Jeff, and he's unable to be with us this Monday night. So I definitely wanted to pick his brains ahead of time because in regards to this study, I like to do the reading. I like to see what Spirit of Prophecy has to say, what the Bible has to say. But he's really great at the logistics of how can this practically be carried out? What are some tools that we can use? So I just have three questions here. I'm going to kind of pick his brains so that if you're looking to relocate to the country, hopefully he can be of service to you. So the first question I have for him is, how do you know where to move? We've got 50 states. The real popular states right now are Colorado, Tennessee, North Carolina. Cheapest states we know is Missouri, Arizona, and New Mexico. So it could be really overwhelming. How do you know where to go? So what would you recommend?
Well, I've talked to a lot of people that have moved to the country, and I've even talked to some people who have moved and actually moved back. And I find that fascinating. And one of the things I learned is that, you want to take time and be careful. This is going to be one of the biggest decisions you make in your life. Selling your home and buying another home or buying some land is probably one of the most valuable assets that you own. So one of the things that I noticed that people have chosen the wrong place to attempt to build or move to is because they didn't have some sort of social connection to the area. So it's really important that you find a location that you'll be drawn to because whether you have family there, friends, church, maybe work, some sort of outlet that you're going to enjoy being at. So what I suggest you doing is to visit this location different times of the year as often as you can. Really get to know the area. Maybe do a short-term rental, do like rent Airbnb. Learn the layout too. Drive the streets, drive to the stores, the restaurants, the hospitals, the schools. Really get your hands on knowing the area because you don't want to just blindly trust what you hear from other people. Think about the favorite things you like to do back home now. Is there a certain type of store you like to shop at, a restaurant, or types of food you like to eat when you go out to eat? Um, do you like going to museums or libraries? And once you look at maybe on some tools I'll mention later, determine the proximity you would be if you lived in that country setting to those locations. And that might help you make a better decision of how far in the country you want to be. Read some newspapers about that particular area. You'll learn a lot. I've been reading the Chattanooga newspaper now for many years, and I've learned a lot about neighborhoods, what's happening, a lot of community events that are going on, as well as even the politics of the area. When you're visiting there, talk to the locals, talk to business owners, talk to real estate agents, and even speak to law enforcement. You'd be surprised at how much you can learn. When you're just traveling around, you see them in the stores or at the gas stations, just strike up a conversation and ask some questions. Most of the time, if they'll be very forthcoming with information. Go to the library and get some books or DVDs about the state. Learn as much as you can. You'd be surprised at what you can learn from the free resources that are out there. Use the internet, Google about the town, see what articles come up, maybe even use YouTube and Google the town or the area. You'd be surprised at how many people have YouTube pages about the particular area they live. And then while you're there, probably the most important thing is to visit the churches, right? You want to feel welcome. You want to feel like you could attend a church and be part of that church family. Ashley and I have been attending a church in Cleveland now for how many years would you say?
Probably like 11.
Yeah, probably 10, 11 years. And we definitely feel comfortable with that church. And we definitely would feel comfortable if we were to move at that location. If you plan on gardening, really get to know the soil and what grows best in that area. So obviously you want to move to an area where the soil is good and you're not going to have to do a lot of work to the soil in order to grow what you want to grow. And then lastly, probably try to learn the weather patterns. Sometimes there's certain weather events that occur that most people don't know about unless you actually live there year round. You want to look out for things like the rainfall, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, things like that. So just to recap real quick, I know it's a lot of information, but when deciding where to live, some of the things, the most important thing is to make sure you have some sort of social connection to a community there so that you feel like it's home. Visit as often as you can, do as much research while you're there, talk to as many people. While you're not there, read some newspapers, use some tools that I'll mention later on, and just spend some time on the internet to learn as much as you can about the area.
All right, thank you for being so detailed and comprehensive. The next question actually is, what should you look for when you're looking at property? Because I've been guilty of just looking at the scenery. Of course, you want some water, you want maybe some elevation, but there's so many things that you need to take into consideration. So in your experience, what should you specifically be looking for on a piece of property?
Sure. One of the biggest things people get caught up on is the acreage, right? They always say, "Oh, how many acres is that?" Or I know somebody that bought, 100 acres or something. And size is important, but there's many other factors that are even more important than size. One of the first things that I can think of is the layout. You should learn the shape of the land. It could be 100 acres, but it could be a really narrow piece of land and just goes on for miles. So you want to know what the layout of the land is, the shape of the land, and also the slope of the land. You're going to want to know how difficult it's going to be able to build on this. Is this a straight up mountain peak, or there are several areas that are level that you could potentially put a home site on? And that goes to the next point, is location to build. That's probably one of the most important thing, is you need to determine where on that land there's suitable building sites, because that can determine a lot of your future expenses. If your building site is at the end of the property, you're going to have to run, if you decide on using utilities, you're going to have to run utilities to the property, and that can be very expensive, whether it be water or electric. Also, just putting in a driveway, clearing all the land, it can get very costly depending on where the location site is to build. The other thing people kind of overlook is, like, where on the location are you gonna, on your land, are you gonna build? It could possibly be the only building site would be right on one of the borders of your property. And it could so happen that your neighbor, his only building site is on that same border. So you can be looking out your window, looking at your neighbor, even though you both own many acres of land. So deciding on learning where the building site on your property is very, very important. Utilities, obviously the water, electric, sewer, you're going to want to study those. You're going to want to figure out what resources you have available to you, if there are any city. If not, what it would cost to put in a well. Same thing with power. Are you going to go with electric, solar, propane, and then lastly sewer? Are you going to put in septic? Those types of things, and what the cost would be associated with it. Some other things to take into consideration are county restrictions on building. You're going to want to learn these because certain counties have a lot of restrictions, and you may not be able to build the house that you plan on it on that particular property or in that county. Taxes. Everyone knows that taxes vary from county to county, so you want to learn, in state to state, you want to learn all about the taxes in the area you want to build. You want to study the builders in the area. This is probably something that people overlook. Some builders will only go so far to build. You could have a remote piece of land and there be no nearby builders that want to travel to your site to actually build. So it's probably important to kind of have a rough idea and maybe even already decide what build you want to use before you use the land. I know I had met with a builder that builds log cabins that I really enjoy. And he said that part of his service is that he will, before you buy the land, he'll go out and survey the land and make sure that you can build the house you want to on that land. So that might be a good idea to already have your builder in mind and let them come out to the land before you buy it. One thing I learned recently is mineral rights to the land. So sometimes you'll buy the land and you have no rights to the land at all. So if there is some sort of minerals on that land, there's certain companies that come in and utilize that land, and you have nothing to do about it or to fight it. So it's something to study and learn about the land. You want to know if there's any wetlands, any protected areas on the property. Obviously, there would be restrictions on where you can build. You want to know if there's any covenants or easements. Are there any power lines or access roads that run through the property that aren't visible by looking at the property, but only on certain types of city maps or government maps. Be careful about structures, existing structures or vehicles on the property. Sometimes a lot of people say, "Oh, look, that's a cute little old barn," or maybe we can like fix up that house, or that car on that property is really old. It's kind of cool to look at. Well, those things might be really costly to remove, and they might even be required to be removed before property, any type of building goes up there. So you want to find out whether or not those things have to be removed and what it would cost to remove them in case you do. You want to check with the county government to see if there's any fines, existing fines with that property. And another thing you can do is you can check with law enforcement and see if there's been any histories of calls to the property. I have a friend who bought 100 acres of property in North Carolina, and he didn't realize this till after he bought it, but the neighborhood kids had been using the property for ATV trails. And there had been many calls that law enforcement had gone out there and chased them off. And he ended up having to actually put up some fencing, actually cut down some trees and put up some signage and stuff because he didn't want kids riding ATVs on his property and getting hurt and turn around suing him. You want to know if there's anyone using that property existing to do some hunting, because that can make for a real awkward situation if you buy the property and they're no longer able to hunt on it. You want to know what the home values are in the area. You don't want to overbuild the neighborhood. You always want to build a house, should be right around in the middle price market of the houses in the area. You want a soil test for the pollution. You know, a lot of people overlook this, but it's really serious. You know, if there is some pollutants in the ground, you may be required to clean up those pollutants. And then more importantly, if you plan on doing any gardening on this property, you don't want to have soiled crops that are polluted and obviously could pose as health problems for you and your family. You want to visit the property as many times as you can in different seasons. Compare what the weather is like, and if possible, see if you can actually camp on the property. If you can bring an RV on or a tent camp, it's really, you learn a lot when you can actually wake up and listen to all the sounds and see all the sights on the property. And then learn about the current vegetation on the property. So know what types of trees, what types of shrubs are on the property, especially if learn if there's any poisonous vegetation and or if there's any invasive species that's growing out of control on the property, because it can become quite cumbersome and expensive to remove those. And then lastly, and probably overall advice I could give is to try to walk every inch of the property and inspect the borders of the property. Don't just look at a piece of paper or take somebody's advice. Get out there and walk it and really get to know that property as best as possible. So
obviously I'm very thankful to have him because like I said, he's more to the logistics. I didn't know any of that. So that's why I wanted to interview him so he could share it with you. But on a side note, he said, you know, get together with your builder, see if they're willing to go that far out. Something a lot of people don't think about is actually hiring the Amish. Everybody knows, like, they're known for their craftsmanship, their hard work ethic. They're not going to take advantage of you. My parents have had like entire furniture sets built by the Amish. My aunt and uncle, they actually had their home built by the Amish. And for those of you that are into like Genesis and creationism, there's actually a huge ark built to scale in Kentucky that was built by the Amish. So just a side note there, you can always check out who's living in the area, what kind of builders there are. But my last question for my husband is, what types of tools and resources do you have? Because for me personally, I like the spiritual aspect of it. So you can read the book Country Living. I also like going to Audioverse. It's a free app. It's also a free website. And just type in there Country Living, and literally hundreds of Adventist sermons on Country Living will pop up. They'll talk about like how to cultivate the soil, how to choose property, what are the spiritual benefits. So like I said, I do like Audioverse. I do like the Ellen White Estates, where I can read the book Country Living. There's also a great YouTube channel called Health and Homestead. It's an Adventist guy who lives out in the country, probably in his 30s, early 40s. He does a lot of videos on like practical skills for living out in the country. So those are my top three. My husband has a lot more. So what would you like to share? What are some tools you have?
sure, these are just kind of basic tools that probably many of you have already used if you've looked at property before, but maybe there's a couple of new ones that might help you out. When you're looking at real estate and property, especially land, you should really try to spend as much time as you can to research it. Months, years, if you can, before you actually make the decision. So here are some basic tools that I use. Any good map program, Apple Maps, Google Maps, Microsoft Maps, any of those. Really zoom in and zoom out, learn the streets, learn the stores, learn the schools, the restaurants, the hospitals, your favorite spots. Measure the drive time, not just the distance in miles. You'd be surprised at how long drive time can be in the country sometimes. Sometimes we take for granted the fact of access to highways, but when you're looking at country stuff, especially if it's mountain range, you may have to go all the way around a mountain to get to a particular place, and the speed limit is very slow. So you really want to study what the drive time is to those things, and use those maps programs, and it can give you a better idea of what your daily lifestyle would be trying to drive to those different locations. And just getting an idea if you like that particular town or community or nearby towns. Next one is realtor.com. I'm sure many of you may have already been on it, but really use it to its full potentials. And what I mean by that is that read listings, read all the listings, not just the listings that you're interested in, read other land listings. Maybe look at listings of lands that are out of your price range. And when you read the listings and you read what the realtor writes, you may learn about certain aspects of that property that it has that maybe your property doesn't have, that you may want a property to have. So learn as much as you can by reading as many listings as you can, especially if you're looking at land in one particular area. Read as many land listings in that area as possible. Another great website is Zillow.com. You can learn about the history and the value. One thing I like about Zillow is gives you a good overview of the property itself, and I like the little history aspects of it. Another one I think a lot of people maybe overlook is the county property appraisers. Just about every county should have a website and tell you a lot about the taxes, the previous taxes for that property. And also sometimes it'll show you who owns it, and you could even do a little research on who the owner is. And then if you want to go even deeper about the property and the history of the property, you want to use clerk of courts websites. Many counties out there have a lot of information, depending on what state it is, have a lot of information that you can learn. You can learn about any existing liens, the history, the title history to the property as well. And then if you really wanted to get technical, there are a bunch of apps out there that you could use as surveying tools, that when you actually walk the property, you could do a lot of measurements and really get technical and stuff with that if it's something that you really wanted to do. So just to recap, use the good maps, use Realtor, Zillow, county property appraiser, clerk of courts, and then if you're really into learning about the topography of the land, maybe use some surveying tools and maps as well.
Thank you. That was really very detailed. I'm very happy to have him. So just to let you know, we're doing like some basic research prior to this, and we've known for a while that North Carolina, Tennessee, Colorado seem to be like the most popular destinations. Obviously because of the scenery, but because of the culture as well. If you're an Adventist, a lot of Adventists are moving to North Georgia, Tennessee. So like he said, that might be a place where you could still get some nice acreage, but you're surrounded with connections with the church family, like-minded believers, things like that. But cheapest states as of now are New Mexico, Arizona, and Mississippi. And I was just checking out Mississippi, like there's some acreage for like $799 an acre. Now, I'm not sure what it looks like. It might be a swamp, who knows? But just to let you know, there is some cheaper acreage out there. There might be a drawback, but play around with these tools. If you want to, you can rewind this to certain points. But I was going to ask my husband, do you mind sharing your email with
Sure.
everyone?
Sure. Like I said, it's just kind of some basic stuff, but I'm willing to help anyone out or research more, and maybe you want to share with me some of the tools that you've used. I'm always looking at different property in different states, and my email address, feel free to send me an email. It's perryjeff@comcast.net. So it's PERRYJEFF@comcast.net. Thanks so much.
Awesome. So we hope this helped and blessed, and we just want to close with prayer. Holy and precious Father, we just thank you that we had this opportunity to study country living. Thank you for inspiring Ellen White to write this book, because a lot of us like the country, but we were not aware of the spiritual and of the physical benefits. And we know eventually you want all of us to get out in the country, especially before the time of trouble. So in this time of transition, just be with us. Please work on us individually, as families, as churches. Show us what we need to do. And please just bring to mind the knowledge, the wisdom, the skill set that we must have in order to successfully live out in the country. Thank you for loving us, and thank you for my husband. In your precious name, amen.
Amen.